The frame determines the future. This is why the frame matters. A fact can be true and still be framed in a way that weakens people. A tragedy can be real and still be taught in a way that removes agency from the next generation. A limit can exist and still become more powerful than it should because people keep repeating it without also repeating what overcame it. That is the danger. The truth is not only what happened, the truth is also what happened after. Destruction matters, but so does recovery. Pain matters, but so does response. Loss matters, but so does rebuilding. If you only tell people what was done to them, you may give them memory, but you might also steal their motion. If you tell people what was done to them and what they built after, you give them memory and power. That distinction matters because the human mind does not only respond to facts, it responds to frames. The same historical event can either produce bitterness, responsibility, courage, fear, strategy, or paralysis depending on how it is framed. That is why repetition is so dangerous. Whatever gets repeated the most, it eventually becomes the emotional reality people live inside. If the repeated story is only destruction, people begin to expect destruction. If the repeated story includes rebuilding, people begin to see rebuilding as part of their inheritance too. That is the higher responsibility of storytelling. You are not just telling people what happened, you are helping shape what they believe is still possible. And that is not only about history, it is about the way people talk about their own lives. Some people repeat their failure until failure becomes their expectation. Some people repeat what their family never had until poverty becomes a prophecy. Some people repeat how tired they are until exhaustion becomes their personality. Some people repeat how hard life is until hardship becomes the only reality they recognize. And again, I am not saying pain is fake. I am not saying hardship is imaginary. I am not saying people can simply think their way out of serious problems. That is not the point. The point is this: the story you repeat will either strengthen your ability to respond or weaken it. That is why we have to be careful with the narratives we inherit. Some narratives are meant to inform us, some are meant to warn us, some are meant to humble us, but some narratives, if left unexamined, become chains. And the tragedy is that people will defend those chains because the chains feel familiar. That is how repetition becomes truth. That is how truth becomes identity. That is how identity becomes destiny, unless you interrupt it, unless you ask a better question, unless you refuse to confuse what has happened with what must always happen. That is the beginning of evolution. Not denial, not delusion, not pretending limits do not exist, but refusing to let inherited limits become unquestioned laws. Then, this is why intention matters. This is where the idea of personal evolution comes in. Because once you understand that repeated beliefs shape what people think is possible, you start to realize something deeper. Your life needs a governing intention. Without a governing intention, you will inherit whatever frame is handed to you. Family will hand you one, culture will hand you one. The internet will hand you one. School will hand you one. Pain will hand you one. Fear will hand you one. Failure will hand you one. And if you do not consciously choose the frame you are going to live from, you will unconsciously live inside someone else's. That is why I keep coming back to this idea. The niche is not always the subject. The niche is the intention. Then personal evolution is the center. For me, the center is personal evolution. That is the thread. That is the reason I can study different things without feeling like I am betraying the main path. Because the main path is not one subject. The main path is becoming. If I study anatomy, it is not random. I am studying the body because the body is the machine I have to live through. If I study writing, it is not random. I am studying language because language is how ideas become visible. If I study economics, that is certainly not random. That is one of my main economics in anatomy is one of my main fields. That's not random. I am studying value, incentives, scarcity, trade, and human decision making because money is not separate from life. If I study acting, well, acting is one of my favorite main skills too, but it is not. That's not random. I am studying presence, emotion, expression, timing, and human behavior. If I study football, which I played at for a very long time since I've been a kid, all the way up till I was 25. I've been playing football since I was 14, and then I stopped at 25. That was the main thing in my life. That's not random. I am studying, even when studying football, I am studying systems, execution, leadership, adaptation, adaptation, pressure, and strategy. If I study technology, it is not random. I am studying leverage. If I am studying health, it is not random. I am studying the foundation that allows everything else to function. The subject changes, the intention does not. That is what keeps the work from becoming scattered. Everything must return to the same central question. How does this help a person evolve? Not just emotionally, functionally. This is what I'm always asking myself when I'm writing, when I'm talking, when I'm making my videos, when I'm building. It always has to go right back to the North Star of my brand. How will this help an individual evolve? This is not just emotionally, but this is functionally. How does this make someone stronger? How does this make someone clearer? How does this make someone healthier? How does this make someone harder to manipulate? How does this help someone build? How does this help someone make better decisions? How does this help someone stop drifting? How does this help someone turn pain into structure? That is the real niche, the person, the evolution, the process of becoming someone who can carry more life without collapsing under it. Because your life is not separate from your business. Your habits are not separate from your money. Your body is not separate from your ambition. Your relationships are not separate from your judgment. Your attention is not separate from your future. Everything connects. That is why the deep generalist has to become dangerous in a disciplined way, not by collecting random knowledge, but by converting different disciplines into a unified operating system. The world becomes the library. Your life becomes the laboratory. Your writing becomes the record. Your business becomes the distribution system. And your evolution becomes the proof. That is why you are the niche. It is not some shallow personal branding phrase. It is a responsibility. It means you cannot hide behind topics. You cannot hide behind aesthetics. You cannot hide behind performance. You have to become the evidence of what you teach. If your message is personal evolution, then your life has to show the attempt. This is what I tell myself. Not perfection, attempt, correction, return, refinement. That is what makes the work believable. That is what makes people trust it. Not because you have everything figured out, but because they can see you are actually building the thing you are talking about. That is the difference between content and documentation. So, what I write and what I post on social media, the videos that I make, the newsletters that I write every week, everything. I have right now 2 different YouTube channels, and I look at it as not content. I look at it as documentation. Content performs, documentation proves. And I think that is what am really building. Not just a newsletter, not just posts, not just products, but a documented system of personal evolution in real time. A body of work people can enter, study, personalize, and use. The return is the point. And maybe that is the real theme underneath this whole letter. Return. Return to the question, return to the system, return to the work, return to the body, return to the intention, return to the frame that gives you power instead of stealing it. Because life will pull you away. Emotion will pull you away. Fatigue will pull you away. Old beliefs will pull you away. Repeated narratives will pull you away. The world will hand you explanations for why certain things are impossible, permanent, inevitable, and final. Some of those explanations will be true. Some will be incomplete. Some will be inherited fear. Some will be repeated lies. Some will be old patterns wearing the mask of reality. That is why the question matters. So before you call it inevitable, ask if it has actually been understood. Before you call yourself lazy, ask if your system is broken. Before you call yourself unfocused, ask what inputs are shaping your attention. Before you call your dream unrealistic, ask whether you have built the structure that could make it real. Not saying that you probably aren't unfocused, and not saying that you are probably not lazy. Not saying that life has inevitable moments, but sometimes when we get so shallow with certain situations that we are experiencing, too many times, there's often more than likely a deeper reason behind that we have to observe, and we have to intentionally observe our life and our behaviors more. So like I said, before you call your exhaustion proof that you are weak, ask whether your body is asking for rhythm. Before you call your past your destiny, ask whether you are repeating the wound more than the recovery. That is not about pretending limits do not exist. Limits do exist. The body has limits. Time has limits. Energy has limits. Money has limits. Skill has limits. But a limit should be studied before it is worshipped. A limit should be tested before it is turned into identity. A limit should be questioned before it is handed to the next generation as law. That is the work. At the level of civilization, that work becomes science, medicine, technology, enterprise, art, and culture. At the level of the individual, that work becomes routine, attention, health, writing, recovery, discipline, judgment, and action. You see where I'm getting with this? The scale changes. The principle stays the same. Do not confuse repetition with truth. I remember a while ago, I was working at this juice bar, and this girl said she just cannot figure out what's true anymore. And this was back in 2017. She goes, what I do now is if somebody says the same thing, I think that's true. I go with that's the truth. If I listen to one podcast and that one podcast is saying the exact same thing as another podcast that I'm listening to, and I'm reading a book, if they're talking about the same thing, if they're all three saying the same thing, I would say that's true. And at that time, I kind of agreed with her. But as I evolved my mind and kept learning, I realized how dangerous that can be. This is why I wrote this letter. This is why I'm talking about what I am talking about. Do not confuse destruction with the whole story. Do not confuse a subject with your intention. Do not confuse rest with surrender. Do not confuse what has been with what must always be. I remember, I'm paraphrasing, but I recall Thomas Sowell. He said something in an interview, and I'll have to find it, and I will write it, and I will talk about it a little bit more so I can specifically say exactly what he said. But I'm paraphrasing him. He was saying something that if a lie has been told over and over again throughout generations and been handed down from generation to generation, that lie eventually just becomes believed as the truth. Something like that, he said that around those lines. And I'm saying it like that because Thomas Sowell is a figure, intellectual giant that I put at the top of the food chain. And I respect him almost probably more than anybody I look up to or study, other than somebody who's in a completely different discipline and field like Deontay Lewis. Other than that, Thomas Sowell is at the top of the line. And I respect him so much because how intellectually honest and mature and responsible he is, and how much of a clear thinker he is. And it really doesn't stop there, but I cannot say enough about the type of individual that Thomas Sowell is. he has really helped to elevate not only just my mind, but my entire soul, my spirit, my way of living. And I really see things in life so much more clear as I came across somebody like Thomas Sowell. A lot of people don't agree with him. A lot of people hate him. People hate his work. And that's because how truth and unapologetic he is. His work is very authentic and the empirical evidence is there. So you can hate him all you want, but you can't discredit him. You can't really argue with him. So if you don't know who he is, I would recommend you just YouTube him, just grab his books, read his books, and see how the facts is where he starts, and that's where most of his work is at. But where I'm talking about is that you acknowledge the facts, you acknowledge the reality, you observe the patterns. Yes, you better do that. If you want to go beyond, if you want to evolve as an individual, acknowledge your reality first. Document the pain that you are experiencing. That's the reality. Pain is life's greatest teacher because it's going to tell you and show you exactly what happened if you listen to it. Not ignore it if you listen to it. But you can't just stay there. Pain can only be useful and valuable if you use it to go beyond of what you're experiencing, evolve of what you're experiencing. That's the whole point of pain. Some people, they either numb their pain, they feel it, they ignore it, or they lie victim from the pain that they're experiencing, and and that pain transforms into suffering. And people suffer throughout their entire life, and they hand it down to generations with the same situation that they face, and they push that down to other people, and other generations after them suffers and decays. The whole point of humanity, for our existence, is for us to evolve as people. For generations coming after us are supposed to be better than us, not worse. And where we are right now, we are getting worse as a human race, collectively. Yes, there are some advancements, technology, medicine, there are some advancements, but the way I see things, up to what I want to see, up to my standards, we are not getting better collectively as people. And anybody who knows me knows that how important children are to me, and us as people, as adults, as a human race. I don't believe that children, who is our future, is the main priority of how we're living, of our society, of our civilization. And any civilization where children's innocence is not preserved, and it's not our main priority as adults, that civilization is decaying. How? Why? Who is our future? Children is our future. If these children are scarred or hurt or taken advantage of, it is self-inflicted wounds of society, of our world. And if our world is hurting itself, decaying, that we are taking away our future. So the world, in a way, is not evolving, it's decaying, it's eating itself. So do not confuse what has been with what must always be. I said that, I wanted to repeat that again because I wanted that to hit. Because the future is not built by people who worship the boundaries they inherited. It is built by people willing to study those boundaries, question them, refine against them, and return to the work long enough to prove something else is possible. That is what I am trying to do. Or I should say, that is what I am doing. In my body, in my writing, in my business, in my relationships, in my systems, in my life, I am trying to stop accepting every repeated pattern as truth. I am trying to stop treating every inherited limit as final. I am pushing to stop drifting inside stories I did not consciously choose. And maybe that is where personal evolution begins. Not with some dramatic reinvention, not with pretending you are already the highest version of yourself, but with one honest act of refusal. Refusing to let the old pattern go unquestioned. refusing to let the inherited frame become your ceiling, refusing to let rest become guilt, refusing to let pain become identity, refusing to let repetition become truth without examination. That is the higher question. Not just can you die, but what are you willing to kill your emotion before your body ever dies? What belief, what story, what habit, what fear, what repeated pattern, what inherited limit, what unexamined assumption? That is where this letter started. And that is where I wanted to land. Some things may be inevitable, but not everything we call inevitable has earned that title. Some things are just old patterns, some things are misunderstood systems, some things are inherited narratives, some things are repeated so often they feel permanent. And some things are waiting for a person, a family, a community, a civilization, or a generation to finally ask, is this actually final? Or have we simply stopped questioning it? Before you call it inevitable, question it. Before you call it truth, examine it. Before you call it life, study it. Before you call it destiny, test it. And before you call yourself finished, return to the system, because you will never be finished. You're going to always keep going to the day you die. So before you call it inevitable, question it. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And if you want to read the letter I just read, it's off Substack. You subscribe to my Substack. And you can also follow me on Instagram as well. That's where you see all of my writings every single day. And on Substack, weekly newsletters. And I will start creating more products, digital products, and stuff like that. And things that we can use as tools to help evolve our life. And that's what I'm doing for myself. I am sketching out things and sketching out tools that I can use for my own self. And if it works for me, it will more than likely work for you. And one thing I acknowledge is that just because something works for somebody, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, doesn't mean that specifically that thing will work for other people. So I want to make it in a way where it's malleable, where you can personalize it for yourself and use it how you see fit for your own life. So I can't just automatically say this is 100% a solution for your problems. That's why I like using the word solutions. But I could say, I created this tool. I created these tools. I created these products. I created these digital products, and I tested and applied it to my own self. It helped me to keep evolving as an individual in all phases of my life. It's malleable for you to be able to personalize it to your own fit. And that's where I am questioning and thinking and digging deep into things that I am building. So, but it starts here. It starts with the writing, and the writing that I present to you off this YouTube video. And this, what I said, you can just take with a grain of salt, I guess, and you can personalize this map, this document into your own life as to how you see fit. Test and apply, document, write, research, observe your patterns. Keep doing that obsessively throughout the day. Keep going. Take care. Like, comment, share, subscribe. I will be back very soon.